And once again, I bring you greetings from the people of Somaliland. And before I make my presentation, I would like to give you a background of my country, Somaliland, because it's often very much confused with other countries whose names start with Somali. My country, former British Somaliland Protectorate, was established in 1884. And it was granted full independence and sovereignty through a proclamation from Her late Majesty the Queen on the 26th of June, 1960. At that time, it became the first African, it became the 12th African country to be independent and the first Somali country to become independent, because as you all know, there was La Côte Française des Somalie, which is a French colony, La Somalia Italiana, which was an Italian colony. There's a portion of Somali people living in Kenya. There's another portion living in the Somali region of Ethiopia. And then there was British Somaliland Protectorate. And that title gives us a unique identity that Somaliland has never been colonized. We had a treaty of protection with Great Britain, but we have always been sovereign and had that agreement, that treaty of protection with Great Britain. And that treaty is what allowed our people during the First World War and the Second World War to fight alongside the Allies. When Somaliland became independent on the 26th of June, 1960, we became the 12th African country, and there were still 34 countries from Africa who are now sitting in the African Union who were still under colonial rule at the time when Somaliland was independent. And among those 34 colonized people still under colonial rule, there was La Somalia Italiana. Therefore, Somaliland and Somalia, when they united on the 1st of July, 1960, it was a union between two independent sovereign nations. It was not the conquest of one over the other, but it was a voluntary agreement, with Somaliland being the senior partner, because Somaliland had gained independence 1 week before Somalia. Fortunately, some unions work, but unfortunately also, some do not. Some partnerships don't work. Some marriages don't work. Countries unite, find it useful, and grow on this. Others find this union non-favorable to the partners who united, and they separate. And such separation came about between Senegal and Gambia, two independent sovereign nations who united, but 3 years later decided that they were better off as friends, as neighbors, rather than being united in a union they did not feel comfortable in. Somaliland and Somalia found their union difficult. Our Somali language was different. Our culture was different. Our traditions were different. The colonial partners that we each had were different. Our system of administration was different. I'm not saying one was better than the other, but we were different. And that difference made it difficult to continue with our partnership. And then, when our people voiced their decision that they wished to withdraw from that union and go back to the drawing board and rediscuss the terms of union, punitive actions took place against the people of my country, Somaliland. We entered into a 10-year civil war from 1982 to 91. Those punitive acts were perpetrated by Somalis on Somalis. People who had the same religion and who had ethnic similarities. When Somalia refused to listen to the will of the people of Somaliland, movements that were pushing for the separation and for the withdrawal of that union were massacred, were bombed, were shot, were put into mass graves. They were shot not by a sniper or two, but the cities were bombed by MiG airplanes, by military tanks against civilian populations. We separated from Somalia because these massacres were perpetrated against our people. Somalia perpetrated crimes against humanity, against our people. They flattened schools. They flattened homes. They flattened hospitals with sick people inside them. They filled the bodies of school children into mass graves after bleeding them to death and using their bodies as mobile blood banks. And mothers would tell children, if troops come into your school, don't stand up straight, particularly if that child was tall. Don't stand up straight because you will be identified as somebody, you come over and you will be bled to death. Hundreds of Somalilanders were massacred. Over 1 million sought refuge in Ethiopia, that became a place that held the biggest population of refugees at that time. Harta Sheikh, you must have heard about, in the late 80s and early 90s. Others went to Yemen, to Djibouti, and beyond, and many came to the shores of Europe and North America and elsewhere, wherever they could find shelter. Ladies and gentlemen, 100 mass graves were identified by UN forensic experts in Somaliland, many of them holding the bodies of children who were no military threat to anybody. How dangerous is a 5-year-old or a 3-year-old? I fail to understand. But shamefully, although these mass graves were identified by UN forensic experts, human rights organizations have done nothing about this, or said nothing about this genocide and this massacre. And I would like to refer you
waxaan inaan ka caban oo nimid inaan beesha caalamka ka caban oo nimid waxaan laga qoraynaa lacagaha ay tuugsiga ku siiyaan Muuse Juudaan iyo Ismaaciil Homergeelaba halka guriga laga xukumo guriga lacagta laga siiya guriga hortiisa waxaan ugu ballanay oo aan go'aano isganiid waxa weeye lacagtaas inay go'do oo ay beeykaan insha Allah ay tageysa inta ay sheegayaan Muuse Juudaan waa iska ilaahayna waa og yahay islaamku waa og yahay Soomaaliya kale waa iska filan shay toban la xaajooday shaashadana oo hargalan lagu biilayay bulshada 10 kaga baxay shariya 10 kuwii kaga kaxaya jooga oo kuwii ku soo xabasa jooga Muuse dacwad kala mihin ilaahay waa leeyahay Muuse laga dhaafay ilaahay waa leeyahay Muuse dhaxlayaba ka baxay Ismaaciil wargala qaaray Ismaaciil wargala markuu shacabka waa leeyahay reer Jabuuti ee loo yimid ee dhibaatada ayaga hayso ee dhaqaalahoodii Ismaaciil ugu biilayo meesha Soomaaliya bulshada ugu biilayo ee Somaliland loo soo roray ee uu ka telegrafka lagu soo rorayo dhaqaalahoodu weeye oo wataafeeda ayaga dhibaatada la qaybsanayda Ismaaciil waligii dawladda Soomaaliyeed kala shaqeyn oo dad Soomaaliyeed buqala xal Soomaaliyeed buqala wada aaminaya Soomaaliyeed ay istaagto ilaa asagu asal saacidi alaas wada ka samayso saamsay alaas ilaahay ka soo balan laakiin Muuse Juudaan kabani dacwo waa lahay asaga fikirkiisa ka falahay asaga hooyadiisa ka falahay marqaati ka shaqeynaa aad islaamiga waxa ka hadlayno meesha maanta talaabaha ku taageerayno waa intaasi oo qaato waliya tagaway waliya tagan war ma laga tagan warkuwii Soomaaliya ma xareeyna oo Soomaaliya oo dhan ma xareeyna kuwii waa tagan Allah turamaha aastayda noqota waxa la leeyahay Soomaali guul baa leeyahay arka buu baawarmaya waxa Soomaaliya ra'iisul wasaaraha Abdullah ibn Hamsid iyo madaxweyne Xasan waxa la leeyahay warada qadiyada Soomaaliyeed ma u dhaarateen magac Soomaaliya u dhaarateen isbuuciyo qadiyadiina cadays hadda halkaan kala leeyahay ila kala laakiin qadiyadiina muujiya oo SSC iyo hadda shacabka Soomaaliyeed ee si caraka u dhimanaya qadiyada la muujiya waa intii dadka la dagaalamay waa Ismaaciil oo raba inuu Soomaaliya muujiyo oo Soomaaliya kala jiro waxa ku soo daabulaya madaxweynaha Soomaaliya Soomaaliya waa qadiyada Soomaaliyeed alakaas waa calanki duuga ahay waa kii awoodaha dhintay waa kii amira dhintay waa kii sayid dhintay waa kii koof loo dilay koof baa meel xaaray hadii idinka yeelayso koof intaan dilno calaaqada kala xujbeen koof intaan dilno hadaan sayid waa soo xukumay aqaalayno asagii baan dilno calaaqada kala xujbeen hadaa koof joogto dunida joogay